This unit looks at the effect of water on plants. We'll start with some of the physical and chemical effects of water. The first thing is that water exists in three different forms on this planet as a gas, a solid, and a liquid. This is pretty unusual and rare on Earth and in the universe. We know that liquid water can freeze and become a solid, or it can evaporate and become a gas. We also know that gaseous water can condense back into a liquid and freeze into a solid, and sometimes gaseous water can actually go directly from a gas to a solid. You know, of course, when water moves from a solid ice to a liquid form, heat energy is required. But did you know that when liquid water turns into solid ice, heat is actually released into the surrounding environment? This characteristic is used when farmers irrigate strawberries on a cold night. As ice forms on the berries, the process of freezing releases heat energy to the surrounding environment, thus warming the berries and keeping them above freezing temperatures. And if you course you know, when you add heat to liquid water, it turns into a gas. It evaporates. This is what we do when we boil water. The difference between liquid water and water vapor is the rate at which molecules are moving. Remember that when you add heat to something, you increase molecular motion. And of course, just stick your hand into steam coming off your teapot, and you'll know that heat is released when water vapor condenses to form a liquid again. Water moves back and forth among these three phases depending on the temperature. Of course, the freezing temperature of pure water is 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, and the boiling point of pure water is 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius. These are the transition temperatures that cause a change in state of water and involve either the absorption or the release of energy. This is important when we start thinking about how water affects gardens. Well, enough about the physical characteristics of water. Now let's look at the chemical characteristics. Water is made up of two atoms of hydrogen and one oxygen. The most important part of this is that they're polarized and that one end is negatively charged and the other is positively charged. The oxygen is negatively charged and the positive side is positively charged. If you flip it over, it kind of looks like a structure of Mickey Mouse. The polar nature of water creates something we'll call a hydrogen bond. This is the attraction between the positively charged hydrogen of one molecule and the negatively charged oxygen of another molecule. This hydrogen bond is a relatively weak bond, but holds water together. Water loves water. Okay, so now let's look at how some of these physical and chemical properties affect how water works in plants. We're going to look at all seven of these special properties of water, beginning with specific heat. Specific heat is a measure of the number of calories or energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of any substance 1 degree Celsius, and water has the highest specific heat of any known substance. This refers to the amount of energy required to raise the temperature of a body of water, for example. This makes water a huge sink or a sponge absorbing vast amounts of energy. Large bodies of water are slow to heat up and slow to cool down because of specific heat. So this has a huge moderating effect on the surrounding environment. In cells, which are 85 to 95% water, it protects them from rapid and drastic changes in temperature. In soil, It modifies temperature fluctuations. A dry desert soil changes more quickly than a moist garden soil. Because of its high specific heat, water resists changes in temperature, which makes it a natural antifreeze for living plants. We know that air near water will warm more slowly in the spring and cool more slowly in the fall because of the high specific heat of the water nearby. Large bodies of water, such as the ocean around Long Island and New York, create a more mild climate than similar latitudes in the Midwest. The Great Lakes also moderate the temperature of nearby land areas. This also means that plants which contain water will change temperature more slowly than the surrounding air or soil. This gives them some protection. Rapid changes in temperature would be devastating for plant tissues. Let's move on now to the heat of evaporation, another characteristic of water. The heat of evaporation is the number of calories required for 1 gram of a substance to change from liquid to a gas. For water, it's also very high. This makes evaporation an enormous cooling factor as much energy is required and heat is used. For example, if 1% of a body of water evaporates, the remaining 99% drops by as much as 11 degrees Fahrenheit because of all the heat required to cause evaporation. When water condenses, of course, the reverse occurs and lots of energy is released. We know that it takes a lot of heat energy to evaporate water. As long as the air temperature is higher than the water temperature, there will be evaporation. This always cools the air near the evaporating surface of the water. Just like the boiling of water or the evaporation of water, heat is required, and this cools the surrounding air. Water evaporates from the leaves through stomates as well, and this causes a cooling of the leaves. It's called transpiration, and as water evaporates from leaves, it cools the plant and the surrounding environment. The third special property of water is called the heat of fusion. The heat of fusion is the number of calories released when 1 gram of substance changes from a liquid to a solid, like the freezing of water releases energy. For water, this number is 80 calories per gram and occurs around 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. Thus, the formation of ice has a warming effect on the immediate surrounding environment as calories of heat energy are released, like on irrigation of strawberries. The reverse is also true. The melting of ice has a cooling effect as energy is used. In South Florida, when it looks like temperature is going to go below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, farmers may turn on their irrigation system and let water freeze right on the strawberries. As water freezes, it releases heat to the berry plants and keeps them from going below 32 degrees, so they're more likely to survive. All right, let's now move on to the chemical properties of water. Remember, water is a polarized molecule. The big oxygen molecule has a negative charge, and the two hydrogen atoms as part of the molecule are positively charged. Because the molecule is bent, it's said to be polarized. And remember, this creates a hydrogen bond. Water loves water. This attribute of water is called cohesion. Water sticks to water. Cohesion, or the attraction of one molecule for another molecule of the same kind, helps water to stick together as it moves up the xylem. We're going to take a look at this now. Water in the xylem forms a continuous string of water molecules and held together by hydrogen bonds, right from the root system up through the stem and into the leaf. As water evaporates from the leaves, it is pulled up through the stem. This stream of water throughout the stem, all the way down to the roots, doesn't break because of cohesion of hydrogen bonds holding them together. Cohesion also explains how small bugs can walk on water. If the bug is light enough, the water surface seems kind of hard due to the hydrogen bonds. It also is apparent when you water droplets on your windshield of your car. Notice how the beads stick together as they run down the window? What's holding them together is cohesion. Water not only loves water, which is cohesion, water loves lots of other polarized molecules, like ammonia in this case. The positively charged hydrogen on one end of the water molecule is attracted to the negatively charged nitrogen in the ammonia molecule. This is called adhesion. And it's important for plant life, such as nitrogen. We'll see how this works. In fact, salt, which is sodium chloride and polarized in water, is an example of adhesion. Salt molecules dissolve in water. All right, now we'll look at the density property of water. Well, ice floats, you know that. But shouldn't ice, which is a solid, sink in water? No, because ice is less dense than water. It's lighter than water. Ice is less dense, it's lighter than the same amount of water, because when ice freezes, it kind of morphs into a crystal that actually expands. This takes up more space. This expansion is strong enough to break up a sidewalk or a rock when water freezes into cracks. Ice expands due to the crystalline nature of water. Cold water is more dense than ice, so ice is lighter and floats in the water. This is because the crystalline nature of the ice expands and requires more space than the equal volume of water. This is important for life. Lakes don't freeze to the bottom because as water temperature drops to about 39 degrees just underneath the ice, it begins to sink. Remember, it's heavy. Cold water is heavy. Thus, it sets up circulating currents underneath the ice, preventing the ice from freezing right to the bottom of the lake, allowing the fish to live. And finally, water is mostly transparent, at least when it's clean. Let's now look at how some of these physical and chemical properties of water work in plants. So you remember, water moves from the soil into the plant roots through osmosis, moves up the stem because of cohesion of water, and it moves out the leaves from evaporation. And here's some of the things that affect the water uptake by a plant. Number of root hairs. Root hairs absorb most of the water because they have most of the surface area in contact with the soil. The more root hairs means more better water uptake. Growth rate of the plant is affected because root growth is usually proportional to the growth rate of the whole plant. New roots are mining new soil all the time, and as roots grow downward, they can find more soil water. Soil temperature is important because warm temperatures allow roots to grow more quickly to find more soil water. And warm air temperature around the leaves means more evaporation of water. This moves water through the plant more quickly. Fibrous root systems on the right generally allow more water uptake than more of a taproot system on the left. Taproots are not as efficient as absorbing water. Water begins to move from the soil into the plant's roots by osmosis. Water is pushed into the roots because there's a higher salt concentration inside the root as compared with outside the root. This is called root pressure. The top picture is what happens in normal situations. When the soil solution is relatively free of salts, water will move into the plant root by osmosis, and you have a healthy plant. When there's too much fertilizer, too much salt in the soil, water can't move in quite so quickly, and the plant wilts. Osmosis, or the movement of water from a region of low salt concentration to a region of higher salt concentration, causes root pressure, and this pushes water into the root system. Water can be pushed right into the roots and right up and out of small plants like grasses. This is called guttation. These little water droplets here are the results of guttation, which is caused by root pressure, which itself is caused by osmosis. Root pressure is not enough to push water up to the stem of large trees. Another major force is needed. The force that moves most of the water through plants is transpiration or evaporation of water from the leaves. This pulls water out of the leaf, which pulls it up the stem. And remember, it stays together because of cohesion of hydrogen molecules. This pulls water out of the root system and allows water to move from the soil up through the stem, out through the leaves, and back into the air. This is a powerful force. Living plants are constantly losing water through their leaves. In the summer months, an enormous amount of water, most of it, 90%, exits the plants through the leaves during the daytime, out through the stomates. But even if the stomates are closed at night, some of the water is lost right through the leaf surface, through evaporation through the epidermis. And remember, transpiration, or evaporation of water from the leaves, cools off the tropical rainforest, cools the leaves in the surrounding environment because heat is required. Heat is used during evaporation, and this cools the surrounding area. Stomates control the rate at which water is lost from the plant. They have the ability to open and close in response to changes in the environment. Let's take a look at how they work. This is an electron microscope picture of a stomate with its pore in the middle and the two guard cells, one on each side, that opens and closes the pore. The guard cells contain lots of chloroplasts as well. Most of the stomates are found on the lower leaf surface of the lower epidermis. There are a few stomates on the top, but too many stomates on the top would allow too much water loss from the plant. Some plants have no stomates on the upper surface at all. The guard cells are able to open and close the pore of the stomate because of the particular configuration of the guard cell. One side of the cell has a much more thickened cell wall than the other side, which is thinner and more pliable. The thinner wall stretches and bends. This causes the pore to open. Guard cells fill with water and open the stomate when potassium ions move in from the surrounding cells. When light hits the guard cells, they swell and the stomatopore appears. Water pressure keeps them open. Light stimulates potassium and other ions to be pumped in from the surrounding epidermal cells into the guard cells. And photosynthesis produces sugar in the light. Both of these increase the osmotic concentration in the guard cells so that water diffuses in and increases water pressure. The cells swell up and the pores open. When it gets dark at night, the water is pumped out of the guard cells. They deflate and the pores will close at night. Also, if the plant is under water stress, water will leave these guard cells and the plant will close its stomates to prevent loss of water. The opening and closing of stomates regulates water movement of the plants. This is important to plant life on the planet. You might say that stomates control the world.